Welcome back. Today, we are going to run the single most insane thought experiment in military history. We often hear about the United Nations Peacekeeping Forces with their blue berets and rules of engagement so strict they can barely defend themselves. But let us imagine a different scenario. Suppose the United Nations Charter was enforced in the most aggressive way possible. Suppose the United Nations possessed its own distinct standing army, an elite force equipped with the absolute cutting-edge weaponry of the year 2025. Not gentle peacekeepers, but machines of total destruction. And to test their true power, we are not going to drop them into a modern conflict. We are going to take a United Nations heavy mechanized brigade and drop them back in time. The destination is the Ardennes Forest in Belgium. The date is December 16th, 1944. The famous Battle of the Bulge. The Nazi war machine is throwing everything it has into a desperate counteroffensive. The Allies are exhausted and underprepared. And suddenly out of the thick fog of the European winter a strange force appears. Tanks painted in stark white with two massive black letters on the hull. UN. Can the technology of the 21st century crush the steel of the 20th century? The short answer is yes. But the longer and more painful answer is, welcome to logistical hell. Let us begin at the moment of impact. The Ardennes Forest is buried in a blizzard. The temperature has dropped below -10 degrees Celsius. The German 6th Panzer Division is advancing with high morale. The sound of Tiger and Panther tank tracks crushing the frozen road create a bone-chilling metallic crunch. American soldiers on the other side are shivering in foxholes with their Colt M1 Garand rifles. Suddenly the air is vibrated by a sound that did not exist in 1944. It is not the chugging growl of a gasoline or diesel piston engine. It is a high-pitched, ear-splitting shriek at a high frequency. It is the scream of a gas turbine engine, a sound that sounds like a jet aircraft, but it is coming from the ground. Out of the mist the white monsters appear. Leading the charge is a company of M182 Abrams main battle tanks in their latest configuration. Flanking them are Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and in the sky is the distinctive chopping sound of Apache attack helicopter. Rotors tearing through the wind. The German soldiers look through their binoculars and they are frozen in shock. They see tanks without the boxy turrets of a Tiger, but with strange sloping angles. They see infantrymen not wearing steel helmets, but wearing ballistic helmets with fur-tubed panoramic night vision goggles that make them look like aliens. An absolute panic consumes both sides. The Germans think this is a secret American weapon. The Americans think this is an army from the future or some supernatural force. Before anyone can understand what is happening, the laser warning receivers on the Abrams tanks are screaming. The United Nations gunners do not need to look through optical sights. They look at digital screens. The fire control system has locked onto the lead Tiger to tank. The distance is 3,000 meters. An impossible range for World War II gunners. Boom. The kinetic energy armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot round leaves the barrel at 1,500 meters per second. It contains no explosives. It is a dart made of super-hard depleted uranium alloy. It punches through the thickest frontal armor of the Tiger to like a hot knife cutting through butter. The German tank turret is blown off instantly. That was not a fight. That was a brutal collision between two eras of technology. Let us pause for a second to analyze the spec sheet. The disparity here is astronomical. On the Nazi side, representing the pinnacle of 1940 for technology, is the Tiger II, also known as the King Tiger. Its armor is thick, homogeneous rolled steel, but it is brittle. Its effective range is only about 2,000 meters in daylight and nearly zero at night. Its rate of fire depends on the muscle power of the loader. On the United Nations side, we have the M1A2 Abrams. Its armor is Chobham composite combining ceramic and depleted uranium. An 88mm German shell fired at this would only scratch the white paint. Its range is up to 4,000 meters thanks to a ballistic computer that automatically calculates wind and temperature. But the most terrifying advantage is the thermal sighting system. While the German soldiers are blinded by the night and the fog, the United Nations soldiers see everything. Thermal sights turn the pitch-black landscape into a bright glowing screen. The body heat of the German soldiers and the hot engines of the German tanks show up like bonfires in the middle of the dark forest. They can see through trees. They can see through smoke. This is an advantage so unfair it is cruel. In the sky, the Apache helicopter hovers 8 kilometers away from the battlefield. The pilot sits in a warm cockpit sipping coffee and firing laser-guided Hellfire missiles. The German soldiers on the ground will die without ever knowing what killed them, but let us turn off the heroic background music. Do not celebrate yet, because right now we are stepping into the most important part of this script. The part that action movies always ignore, but is the thing that decides victory or defeat in reality. It is the logistical nightmare when you bring an army of the 21st century back to 1940 for you have just turned billion-dollar weapons into the most expensive paperweights in history. The first and deadliest problem is fuel. The Abrams tank runs on a Honeywell AGT-1500 gas turbine engine. It is designed to drink JP8 jet fuel or clean diesel with a high cetane rating. In 1940, for the world has no JP8. The gasoline of this era has a low octane rating and is full of lead and impurities. The diesel of the Germans and Americans at that time is very crude and dirty. If you pour 1940 for diesel into the tank of an Abrams, the fuel filters will clog in just a few hours. The delicate electronic injectors will be destroyed by the sediment. The engine will overheat and die permanently. And the Apache helicopter, forget about it. Pouring World War II aviation gas into a modern turboshaft engine is the fastest way to create an explosion in mid-air. The second problem is technology withdrawal syndrome. The entire modern military doctrine relies on GPS, which stands for Global Positioning System satellites. In 1940, for there is nothing in Earth orbit except the moon and a few rocks. The digital map screens on the tanks and aircraft will display a bright red nitrogen monoxide signal message. Satellite-guided JDAM smart bombs will become dumb bombs. Tomahawk cruise missiles will not know where to fly. The Blue Force tracking system used to identify friend or foe will be useless. Modern soldiers who are used to looking at tablets now have to pull out paper maps and relearn how to use a compass from scratch. A disaster of command and control. The third problem is ammunition. The HK-416 rifles of the United Nations soldiers use 5.56mm standard NATO rounds. American soldiers use 30-06 Springfield. German soldiers use 7.92mm Mauser. Not a single bullet matches. Once the United Nations Brigade fires all the ammo they brought with them, the show is over. You cannot stuff a 75mm shell from a Sherman into the 120mm smoothbore cannon of an Abrams. And finally, maintenance. The electronic systems of modern weapons are extremely sensitive to moisture. The mud of the Ardennes will invade the circuit boards. Without clean rooms, without diagnostic computers, and without spare parts, the modern tanks will lock their safety systems when they encounter the smallest error. Now let us go back to the battlefield to see the actual outcome. Phase 1 is the first 6 hours. This is the slaughter phase. The Germans are completely taken by surprise. The United Nations M1A2 tanks sit still and open fire. Every shot is a German tank turned into scrap metal. The 30mm cannon of the Apache helicopter tears through the German infantry formations. The sound of the autocannon sounds like a giant canvas being ripped apart, spreading absolute psychological terror. The German 6th Panzer Division is almost wiped out in 30 minutes. German soldiers panic and run away, throwing down their weapons. They believe the apocalypse has arrived. The victory of the modern side is absolute and indisputable, but after 6 hours, phase 2 begins. The low fuel warning lights on the dashboards start blinking. The Abrams tank guzzles fuel terribly even when idling just to run the generator for the electronics. The Apache helicopters are forced to return to the field base and stay on the ground forever because there is no aviation fuel. The United Nations Brigade commander tries to contact Allied command, but it is useless. Their radio frequencies are digital frequency hopping and highly encrypted. It cannot talk to the static-filled analog radios of 1944. They are completely isolated even though they are standing right next to their own side. Phase 3 begins on the second day. The fuel is completely gone. The United Nations Brigade is forced to shut down their engines. The invincible monsters now turn into concrete bunkers sitting motionless in the snow. The electric turret rotation system does not work. The gunners have to use manual mechanical cranks. Rotating a turret weighing tens of tons by hand is torture and extremely slow. The thermal sighting system shuts down because the batteries are dead. The night vision advantage disappears. The Germans, after regaining their composure and scouting again, realize this weakness. They see that the white monsters are no longer moving. They begin to change tactics. Instead of a head-on confrontation, they use 150mm heavy artillery and mortars to rain fire on the fixed United Nations positions. The armor of the Abrams tank can withstand artillery shells, but the external sensors like cameras, sights, and antennas cannot. Shrapnel destroys all the eyes and ears of the vehicle. The modern tank is now both blind and deaf, sitting still and taking a beating. German infantry begin to swarm. They use overwhelming numbers. They weave through the forests, approaching the blind spots of the tanks. The United Nations soldiers fire back fiercely, but their ammo is running low. Every time they pull the trigger, they are one step closer to death because there is no resupply. Finally, when the last bullet is fired, the elite soldiers of the 21st century are forced to open the tank hatches, holding pistols or knives to fight hand-to-hand. Or worse, they have to abandon their billion-dollar machines and retreat on foot toward the American lines. So what is the final result? The damage summary is as follows. The German side lost about 200 tanks and 5,000 soldiers in just the first 6 hours. A tactical disaster unprecedented in German military history. The most elite panzer division was ground into dust. The United Nations side lost 0 tanks to direct enemy fire. Their armor was impenetrable. However, 100% of their combat vehicles were abandoned on the battlefield and fell into the hands of the Germans or the Allies for study. The United Nations forces won the Battle of the Bulge. They stopped Hitler's counteroffensive faster than any unit in actual history. But immediately after that victory, they became a massive burden. They became regular infantrymen with no vehicles, no artillery, and begging for canned meat from American soldiers. This story leaves us with a bloody lesson in military philosophy. Modern technology is like an Olympic sprinter, fast, powerful, and flashy, but requires a special diet and perfect competition conditions. World War II technology is like an old donkey. Slow, stubborn, ugly, eating dry grass or straw to survive. But it will carry the cargo to the final destination regardless of the weather. If you intend to time travel to the past to dominate the world, do not bring an Abrams tank or a stealth fighter. Bring an oil refinery, an ammunition production line, and a team of skilled mechanical engineers. Because in war, amateurs talk about tactics, while professionals talk about logistics. True power does not lie in the biggest gun, but in the most resilient supply chain. Thank you for listening to this fictional battlefield report. See you in the next insane scenario.